Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order this October 16th, 2023 meeting of the Town of Key Island Board of Zoning Appeals. I'm Frank Cassidy, the chairman of the board, and your cases will be heard today by myself as well as my colleagues Jay Lewis, Ben Farabee, Morris Hannon, Lynn O'Leary, and Larry Rosenfeld. Staff members here today are our planning director, John Taylor Jr., and Daniel Vincent of the planning staff, as well as Joe Wilson, who is our attorney for the BZA. Our case rulings from this and any BZA meeting are available for public review and inspection during normal business hours at the town hall. We are broadcasting this meeting live via Zoom, so it's important that we don't talk over one another. So if you want to speak, please raise your hand and I'll recognize you. I would ask the members of the public who are here today if you're familiar with the procedural workings of the BZA. If you are, I will skip the comprehensive explanation. Is that okay with everybody? Okay, good answer. Because today's hearing is a public fact-finding meeting, we are in compliance with the Freedom of Information Act and SC Code 6-29-70. This is a quasi-judicial body, so everything said in this meeting must be complete, true, and accurate. All of the information provided to the BZA is considered evidence, and this board may certify contempt of circuit court if false statements are made, either in writing or orally. Staff has placed a sign-up sheet outside for people who wish to address the board. I'd just remind you to speak into the microphone, and that when it's your time to speak, come to the microphone at the podium up here and state your name, business address. Because of the quasi-judicial nature of this meeting, each person who wishes to address the board will be sworn in. So in order to expedite this procedure, we'll do that as a group. So anyone who wishes to speak today, please stand, and Joe will swear you in.
Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Thank you, everybody. I'll now call BZA case 23-000014 at 329 Catbrier Court. Staff will present facts pertinent to the case. I'll then call the applicant to address the case. As I mentioned, I'll ask the applicant to stand at the podium. And then we will have anyone who wishes to speak either in favor of or against the case to follow that same procedure, and those folks will be limited to 3 minutes, and the applicant will have an opportunity to respond. So with that, I will turn the floor over to Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the BZA, appreciate your time today. Our first case being presented is BZA case 000014. The variance request is for a reduction of the required 30-foot rear setback for approximately 145 square feet encroachment for a proposed pool. The property address is 329 Catbrier Court, TMS number 20901000046. Property owners are Lucerne Catbrier LLC, Jim and Denise Apple, being represented by Kevin Whaley. The lot size is approximately 14,301 square feet, and per Charleston County records, the existing residence was constructed in 1988. Per the Town of Kiowa Land Use Planning and Zoning Ordinance, they do require a 25-foot front setback 15-foot side setbacks and a 30-foot rear setback. The subject property has a maximum coverage of lot coverage of 33%, and portions of the existing property currently encroach into the required rear setback and is considered legally non-conforming with regards to setbacks. The property is located in R1 residential zoning district within the developed lands of Kiawah Island and sits adjacent to Cougar Point Golf Course to the south. Adjacent properties to the north and east are also located in R1 residential zoning district. Here's an aerial view of the property. Staff took a site visit, and here are a couple site images. The front of the property. Adjacent properties. Side of the property. Rear. The area of question here is staked out in orange, and this is the approximate location of the proposed pool. And again, the proposed plans are requesting a 145 square foot encroachment for a new pool. The subject property is subject to review by the Kiawah Island Architectural Review Board. The applicant has submitted to the Kiawah Island ARB for review. The KIARB on August 19th, 2023 granted approval for setback variance stating the variance request for the proposed pool to extend beyond the rear setback as shown is approved due to the unique shape of the lot, that the home was originally set back to preserve trees, and that the removal of the existing stair contributes a reduced encroachment. A proposed landscape plan showing revegetation of areas impacted by construction and new plantings as needed to meet current ARB standards and guidelines should be submitted for review and approval 60 days prior to landscape installation. Staff took a site visit and the following determinations have been made. We'll kind of walk through the site plan real quick. So here is a picture of the current survey. Here are illustrations of the proposed pool. And a lot coverage table. You can better see the encroachment on this picture. Everything shaded in blue is the 145 square feet. Again, this is existing. These are proposed. Moving on to the approval criteria. Criteria A, there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. There may be extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the property due to the size and location of the existing trees in the front of the property and the unique shape of the lot. The applicant has stated in their letter of intent, quote, "The natural trees retained in the front present a natural buffer to the street and allow the home to be secluded visually from the street. This adds greatly to the streetscape and community ambience," end quote. Criteria B, these conditions do not generally apply to other properties in the vicinity. These conditions may be unique to the subject property and may not generally apply to other properties in the vicinity. Subject property is located in R1 residential zoning district. The subject property is legally non-conforming with regards to setbacks. The adjacent properties to the north, east, and west are also located in R1. Subject property is located adjacent to Cougar Point Golf Course to the south. Existing structures in the vicinity may or may not have similar encroachment based on current setback standards. For the applicant's letter of intent, quote, each individual property has special attributes in shape, size, and orientation, and the specific natural trees which exist have compelled the current location of the home to be placed irrespective of the generally recommended rear setback now being applied. Criteria C, because of these conditions, the application of this ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. The application of this ordinance to 329 Catbrier Court would prohibit the construction of the proposed pool or the proposed pool addition and proposed structure, which encroaches into the required 30-foot rear setback. However, it does not unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. Per the applicant's letter of intent, quote, an unnecessary hardship is present when the general rear 30-foot setback is applied to the home today. With the 30-foot rear setback applied, the existing home has a non-conforming area of both heated area and deck and porches. The planned pool addition, when completed, will reduce the non-conforming rear stair project slightly and allow the home to remain within the 33% allowable lot coverage. It is noted that only 63% of the pool requires a variance or 145 square feet. Criteria D, the authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property or the public good, and the character of the zoning district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. The authorization of the variance may not be of substantial detriment to the adjacent property or the public good. A portion of the existing single-family residence currently encroaches into the rear setback, and the subject property is legally non-conforming with regards to setbacks, which the existing structure encroaches. The proposed pool suggests an encroachment of 145 square feet with a proposed lot coverage of 33%. The tree buffer on the adjacent property provides additional screening from neighboring properties. And per the applicant's letter of intent, quote, the residential character of the property is very secluded from the adjacent neighbors to the north and west sides. Visibility is well screened by existing natural vegetation and the current orientation of the neighboring homes. The rear of the property is also well screened by many large trees. This current setting will allow for extensive screening from all neighbors. The visual impact will be minimally by the planned pool addition, end quote. Criteria E, the board shall not grant a variance, the effect of which would allow the establishment of a use not otherwise permitted in a zoning district, to extend physically a non-conforming use of land, or to change the zoning district boundaries shown on the official zoning map. Granting of this variance would not allow the establishment of a use not otherwise permitted in the zoning district, extend physically a non-conforming use of land, or change the zoning district boundaries. Criteria F, the fact that property may be utilized more profitably should a variance be granted. The board may not consider profitability when considering this variance request. Criteria G, the need for a variance shall not be the result of the applicant's own actions. The need for a variance may be the result of the applicant's own actions. The existing structure is legally non-conforming with regards to setbacks. Per the applicant's letter of intent, quote, the owners purchased the property in its current form and had no prior involvement in the existing non-conforming encroachments now in place, end quote. Criteria H, granting of this variance will not be contrary to the public or neighborhood interest, nor will not adversely affect other properties in the vicinity, nor interfere with harmony, spirit, intent, and purpose of these regulations. Granting of this variance may not be contrary to the public or neighborhood interest, may not adversely affect other properties in the vicinity, nor interfere with the harmony, spirit, or intent of the purpose of these regulations. Per the applicant's letter of intent, quote, granting of this variance will ultimately lead to an overall improvement of the community aesthetic and allow the owners to upgrade, maintain their property over time, as is possible with adjacent properties that do not experience this particular unique natural hardship, end quote. Criteria I, granting of this variance does not substantially conflict with the comprehensive plan nor the purpose of this ordinance. Granting of this variance may not substantially conflict with the comprehensive plan or the purposes of this ordinance. The applicant's proposed plans does not meet the lot coverage requirements for the subject property. The applicant is reducing existing lot coverage by demolishing a staircase at the rear of the property and a small portion of the front driveway. Per the applicant's letter of intent, quote, granting the variance and relaxing the setbacks at the rear of the lot does not conflict with the comprehensive plan in this unique application. I would like to remind the members of the BZA that we did receive a letter, and it is included in your supplementary packets. And that does conclude staff's review.
Questions for Dan?
Dan, are they definitely going to remain inside the orange boundary? They're not extending beyond that in any way, shape, or form?
From my interpretation, yes, that is the area of the pool, and it will not go beyond those.
Okay, when the developer comes up, I can ask the same question then. Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank you.
I had a question for Dan and/or John. We allow encroachment into the setback for an uncovered deck, correct?
Yes, sir.
Why is it different for a pool? It seems to me that the visual impact is about the same.
So there are two different components to how we look at pools within our zoning code. One is if that pool is elevated, and then two, if that pool is an in-ground pool, which they have two different standards. If that pool is elevated, then it's essentially treated as it needs to meet that standard building setback as it was part of the principal structure. If it was an in-ground pool, it could encroach into that rear setback, but it just needs to be a minimum of 10 feet from the property line. So from a visual standpoint, an elevated pool would be treated as just as if it was building or built structure.
Part of the house.
Part of the house.
No, it looks more like an uncovered deck.
So, and even though it may look like an uncovered deck, I think the other part that you play into that is because pool is a accessory use by our code, and so that's why it's treated a little bit differently just than an open deck.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Whaley?
Okay, that's all right, Good morning, members of the board. My name's Kevin Wally. I'm with Architecture Plus. I'm an architect, and this is Paul Bowman, also an architect. I want to thank the staff for the very thorough information and presentation that they put together. I'd just like to note that Jim and Denise Apple are doing some interior renovations in the house. And when they purchased the property, they realized that they might like to do a pool. So they met with a pool contractor, and the pool contractor with Aqua Blue, Paul Straits, very experienced, Kiowa, and they were advised that they probably needed to talk to the Architectural Review Board because it appeared when they had a new survey done that they might have an encroachment problem. So a representative from the Architectural Review Board met with them And basically, what they did is they made a recommendation that an imaginary setback line extend from the corner of the existing deck parallel with the rear property line. I'm just going to point this out to you. This is the rear property line. This yellow dotted line touches the deck, almost touches the porch, but is parallel to the rear setback. And so this imaginary setback was discussed as a possible alternative, considering that the property was set so far back in the very beginning. It was built in 1988, as was referenced. There's a small picture at the top left of that illustration that shows how heavily treed the site is. There are about 8 very large oaks and magnolia tree up there. The property was set very far back so that, in fact, some of the heated area and some of the deck area and some of the porch area actually is beyond the current application of the setback. After careful study, we put together as architects a small pool that the owners would accept. We submitted it to the Architectural Review Board for their review, and we received approval of it. And as was noted, because of the trees and the natural desire to preserve trees, and if those of you that are familiar with Kiowa from 1988 range will understand that trees were pretty much sacrosanct on a lot of lots that had a lot of wonderful trees, and that's really what I think happened here, is the house was pushed back. I would like to note, as part of the improvement review with the Kiowa ARB, they were indicating that there were not going to be any tree removals permitted. So in response to the individual that commented about being concerned about the screening of this pool from the back, there's no intention of removing any trees. In fact, the ARB did require that a proposed landscape plan be submitted and approved prior to 60 days of installation that will have foundation planting and additional screening planting as required at the back of the pool. And we would intend to provide that plan to both ARB and the town as required. We did remove a non-conforming staircase that projected out further than the pool. So in kind, we felt like we were taking away something that was projecting a lot further and pushing it back. And I would like to make a special note of in the exhibit that your staff put together, page 6, or exhibit number 6, shows the site in blue, and it shows the extensive natural vegetation area behind this lot. The lot being, of course, north of the golf course, but that area to the northeast behind this house. When you're on the property itself and you look out the backyard, it feels like there's a lot more land out there. And so what I would suggest is that there's an additional buffer that's there before you get into this Red Bay property. And as I said, there's no intention of removing any natural vegetation. From an architectural perspective, there are drawings in there that show a natural inset between the existing deck and the existing heated area of the house and the existing porch. And I think one of the board members asked that question about that orange taped off area. And when you look at the plan, you'll see that the majority of that pool sits back in this alcove. So it's our belief that aesthetically from the backyard, the pool, the deck, the pool, and the rear porch will have really this nice, finely developed aesthetic line. And aesthetically, we think it's a good design. We think it meets the requirements from a hardship standpoint due to the natural trees and pushing the lot back. We are within now the 33% lot coverage, so we feel that the clients that own this home now have been able to utilize the property. There are zoning requirements where we can't put a pool in the front of the house. We can't really put it on the side of this house because it's going to be too exposed. So our only option really is to try to go to the back. And what we did is a very small pool. The request for the variance is 145 square feet, and it looks for a remedy to a serious and substantial loss of use of this property, we believe, due to its original siting and intention to save the trees. The variance should be given significant consideration by this board to ameliorate this hardship, we think, and we appreciate your time. And if there's any questions, happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Wally. Any questions for Mr. Wally?
Yeah, I have a question. The people bought the house as it existed after the original owners built it with the trees there. So what hardship is it on the present owners when they say they have to live within that? Because they didn't sacrifice anything, they bought it that way. So what's
Well,
the
the hardship-
sacrifice they're making with regard to the trees?
Well, maybe I didn't state it correctly. When I said it's a hardship, I was referring to the fact that if you look at where the house was built in '88, and then if you overlay the setbacks that were more stringently applied today, they can't possibly do much of an addition or much of an improvement in the back in terms of a physical addition, because the house it's not conforming. So that's what I meant when I said that.
What's changed since they bought it?
What's changed?
Yeah.
Oh, nothing.
Oh, okay, so they bought it that way, knowing
Well,
what
however,
the setbacks were, et cetera.
Well, I believe that they got the survey after they bought it. I think they got an updated tree and topo survey. And to be quite candid, many of our lay people don't really understand some of these restrictions and setbacks. They probably weren't planning on adding a pool when they first bought it. You know, I mean, I think they're improving it now that the kids are going to college and they're using it more. It's one of those things where I don't think if they had all the answers in the beginning, maybe they wouldn't have bought it. I don't know.
Are they planning on living in the house or renting it?
Sorry?
Are they planning on living in the house or renting it?
Oh, they're planning on living it. It's a second home for the family.
Let me pursue with you a little bit this, the so-called imaginary line. I just want to get the theory behind it. And if I look at your chart, or we put it up on the screen, essentially what that line is it's the extent to which anything currently encroaches on the setback.
I was not at the initial meeting that the ARB had. We were third-hand advised that this was a direction that one of the ARB representatives thought would work.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand it. If I, from what I can see here, where you drew that imaginary line is the extent to which anything existing comes out. So although you are adding to the square feet of incursion, you're not making that incursion any closer to the back property line. Do you want to say something about this?
Yes, Tom Emanuel, Director ARB. Mr. Chairman, council members, yes, you're correct in that interpretation, that the board looked at that as a delineation where there would be no further encroachment towards the setback, acknowledging that they are adding square footage, but then they are also removing an existing encroachment that further respects that line.
The stairs.
Right, correct. Yeah, that would be the stairs, correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I just have a quick question. There was a note in here from Mr. Parr, but I didn't hear any conversation about cleaning up the landscaping between the home and the golf course. Do you know what I'm talking about, John?
Well, I wanted to address that by saying that there's no tree removal planned.
That's what I thought, but I just wanted to confirm
And in
it.
fact, it would be customary, you know, I mean, I don't want to speak for Tommy, but it would be customary for, if there's some deficiency in the backyard where there's too much visibility, maybe some of the lower ground cover or lower shrubbery has been died off or whatever while the house was not being lived in, that may be something that the ARB may ask us to supplement.
Right, the way the house is positioned now, though, you cannot even, like, you can barely see the golf course when I walked back there.
And that's not gonna change.
And that's not gonna change. That was my question.
Yeah, so as a matter of practice, so we received the landscape plan 60 days prior to completion. We review that in office and as well as in the field, and then also there's a final inspection that we do where we, the ARB, have the right to request additional plantings if we feel like they're deficient. And we are very sensitive to outdoor living activities next to the golf courses and neighbors, and making sure those are sufficiently screened.
Can I just ask one other question about that? Why are we submitting something 60 days from completion and not some type of projected landscape plan of what it's gonna look like, so that we would, I mean, some applicants do come and they have it, so that we have an idea, like we're saying, well, you know, providing we see the landscape plan, but I've been here almost 2 years and I don't think I've ever seen a landscape plan come back. So I'm just asking, why do you not ask them to submit that when they send the variance, the request to the variance for us, so we have a complete package?
I would have to do some questioning on the board on that, but that has been a practice when I arrived here. But to that point, we do receive landscape plans sometimes, not always, but the 60-day timeframe there is just so that we have time to make recommendations prior to them submitting for a final inspection.
So John, are you seeing the landscape plan and it's not coming to us? Because sometimes we say, you know, upon the review of the landscape plan, but
So a landscape plan is not required by our town ordinance for this. So typically, when you all see a condition as recommended by staff to add to, it's something that staff would have recommended based on what we've noticed on the site conditions to improve or help mitigate what might be that impact. For this particular case, we felt that the additional area of where the golf course extended, you wouldn't be able to even see beyond that point, and so that you wouldn't be able to see the landscaping. The final thing that I'll note is that if the board desires to put a condition on that, you still have that ability, even though it was not necessarily recommended by staff. So if you wanted to require a landscape plan to be submitted as part of your decision, then that still is a condition that you can add. One final note while I am here, I did want to add just one note of context to the letter submitted by Mr. Parr. It was actually submitted prior to him actually seeing the full set of plans. And so I did have a conversation with the homeowner who did feel, I'm not speaking as part of the record for her comments, but she did felt more comfortable based on her understanding of the wooded area that's adjacent to the lot, the golf course.
right.
Yeah.
That's why I just wanted to make sure that buffer was gonna remain, which is what I had thought everybody had said.
Answer your question.
Yeah, that's fine. Yep.
One, Mr. Wiley? This is sort of an aside. Has anyone, I walked back there and it's extremely treed, the whole area. Do you envisage any problem in getting construction equipment back there that might have to require removal of trees? Not the actual construction itself, but to get the equipment back there, do you envisage any trees might have to be removed or damaged in the process?
I don't think so. I think we can get around the left side of the garage. It does get a little tight right there, but I think that one tree was a palm.
Yeah, I thought mostly the proximity trees were palms.
Yeah, I think right around there, it's a palm. But certainly you've got to have at least 8 feet clear probably to get the backhoe in there to.
So if you do remove,
Well,
say,
actually-
a palm tree to get back there, would you replant it in the same location?
I'm sorry, let me correct myself. It's not an in-ground pool, it's elevated.
Right.
So most of the footings are hand dug, and then the
Okay.
concrete block, and then they do a cast-in-place pool, so it's I would feel secure in telling you they're not going to injure any trees.
Thank you.
And let me clarify for one of the other board members, you asked me if the clients had considered or why they bought the lot. I was just advised by my associate, Paul Bowman, that they had the survey, you think, before they closed? And so that was what prompted the initial discussion with the Architectural Review Board, is that if they were going to do a pool, they needed to apply for a variance. So at some point, they were aware that they had a non-conforming situation back there and still went ahead with the purchase.
Anything else? I'd entertain a motion that anyone would care to make.
Can I make a motion?
Sure.
I know I'm normally on the wrong side of these issues because I don't believe anybody should ever encroach on anything. But I walked that property, and if they build that pool and paint it neon green, you couldn't see it from Red Oak. I don't care. I see no reason why this should not go through. So I make a motion that we approve it as presented.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? I just note that I agree. I don't see who this hurts, given the way this thing is structured. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. So because of the unusual and placement of the house and the character of the lot and the trees, this is why we're approving this variance. Thank you, folks. Okay, we will move on to, what is this one, 16?
Yep.
BZA 23000016 at 31 Marsh Cottage Lane. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our final case of this afternoon is a variance request. BZA application, BZA 23-000016. The applicant and property owner, Christy and Frederick Farber, are being represented by Mr. Carter Ricks at the property of 31 Marsh Cottage Lane, has requested a variance for the reduction of the required 30-foot rear setback and 15-foot side setback. And this is for approximately 92 square feet of encroachment for a proposed pool and deck addition. The subject property is zone R2 residential, and for the record, the TMS number is 26509000014. Approximately, the lot is approximately 18,166 square feet in size, and the existing structure was constructed in 1995. Acquired by the Farbers in 2021 based on Charleston County records. It does sit adjacent to the marsh to the south, and adjacent properties to the north and east are also located in the R2 residential zoning district. The adjacent property to the west across Governors is located in the R1 residential zoning district. And this property is also subject to the Key Island Architectural Review Board standards review. This subject property requires a 25-foot front setback, 15-foot side setback adjacent to Lot 30, and a side setback of 40 feet adjacent to Governor's Drive, and a 30-feet rear setback. The applicant's proposed plans do include a proposed deck and pool modification, and these proposed plans modify the rear deck and add a pool of approximately 420 square feet. To include the infinity edge. Here's that zoning map that shows the property being zoned R2 residential. As noted across Governor's Drive, the property is zoned R1, and to the south, they're adjacent to open space marsh area. A few aerial images that show the context of this 31 Marsh Cottage, where it sits on the corner of Marsh Cottage and Governor's. This is the front of the subject property. Adjacent properties, the side of the subject property and towards the rear of the subject property. Existing property as well. The applicant's proposed plans are stated. Here's the existing structure, including its non-conforming structure elements. The applicant's proposed plan does include that deck and rear addition of the pool to the south. That existing lot coverage is approximately 24.6%. And the area of encroachment to the rear setbacks approximately 663 square feet. And the proposed modification succession encroachment of approximately 92 square feet. So that's the reason for the request today. This results in a proposed lot coverage of 31.1%. The applicant has submitted to the Architectural Review Board, and they've granted approval for this particular variance, stating, quote, given the continued grand tree preservation, the ARB approves a reduced setback variance for the previous submittal of the pool and cantilevered overspill trough. You can see the elements of the proposed pool, which encroach a portion of the side setback and a portion shown in blue to the rear. The elements that's shown here do show the infinity edge, and so a portion of the encroachment that's shown does include the cantilever that was shown on the previous slide here. Included in the materials were the elements of nonconformity, and based on staff review, I'll go through the approval criteria now. Beginning with criteria A, staff believes that there may be extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to this particular property. And this is due to the size and location of the existing mature trees on site, particularly at the rear of the property in the proximity to its critical area, as well as the double frontage adjacent to Governor's and Marsh Cottage. As noted, there is a 40-foot side setback off of Governor's Drive. And the subject property also contains several trees, including 3 live oaks at the rear of the property. Per the applicant's letter of intent, there is a grand tree in the size of 31 inches at the rear of the property that creates an extraordinary condition that has guided the design and location of the raised pool. And this particular pool design and constructability of the proposed project is in direct response to that natural and irreplaceable element. An additional exceptional condition is that the 31 Marsh Cottage Lane has a substantial side setback of 40 feet along Governor's, which was implemented after construction of the home. And locating the pool on the southwest portion of the rear yard has been deemed a detrimental location for the health and viability of the live oak, and is further constrained by the existence of the 40-foot side setback. Criteria B, these conditions may be unique to the subject property, not generally applying to other properties in the vicinity. The subject property is zone R2 residential, and the subject property is legally non-conforming as stated earlier. The adjoining properties adjacent are also zoned R2 to the northeast and west, and to the, northeast and west, and then across Governor's, it's zone R1 to the west. The subject property to the south is located adjacent to marshlands. Existing structures in the vicinity may or may not have similar encroachments, and the applicant's letter of intent states that the existence, quote, the existence of the grand live oak so close to the main residence and exterior living space is a unique condition that does not apply to other properties. And of the 11 properties in the Osprey Fingers subdivision, 31 Marsh Cottage is the only property with a 40-foot side setback along Governor's Drive. Beyond the Osprey Fingers subdivision, The lot remains unique in its condition of a 40-foot side setback. And the property across Governors at 805 Osprey Cottage Lane has a 30-foot side setback. Criteria C, which speaks to the conditions for this particular property that would prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. The application of this ordinance to 31, this would prohibit the construction. The proposed deck and pool do encroach into that required setback, and that's the 15-foot side as well as the 30-foot rear setback. Per the applicant's letter of intent, due to the location of the Grand Live Oak in the center of the rear yard and the 40-foot side setback, the current ordinance and the natural features on the lot impact the ability for the owners to utilize the backyard and exterior living space. The mass of the root plate and upper branching is predominantly located on the southwest side of the critical root zone. Construction on that side of the property, as outlined in the arborist report, will be detrimental to the Grand Oak and is not advised by the arborist. In response to the arborist report, which details the nature and habit of the tree, the design and construction of the proposed plans respond to these unique conditions. Looking at criteria D, the authorization of the variance, it may not be of substantial detriment to other properties of the public good. A portion of the single-family resident encroaches into the required setback today, and the subject property is legally non-conforming. The proposed pool and deck does encroach approximately 92 square feet with the proposed lot coverage of 31.1%. The applicant has stated in their materials, quote, neighboring properties will be affected by the granting of the variance, will not be affected by the granting of the variance. Preserving the tree and creating a plan to work around it maintains the character and canopy of this district. The 31 Marsh Cottage Lane, and it's located on a corner lot, and the property backs up to the marsh and only has one adjacent neighbor. The adjacent neighbor has provided a letter of support included in the application. The proposed location of the pool on the southwest corner of the property is furthest away from the right-of-way and the public realm. The Governor's Drive side of the property is visible from the public realm. Working in the coordination with the Kiowa Island Architecture Review Board, a planting plan has been developed to ensure proper screening on the two sides and the rear of the property. This ensures that the exterior improvements will not be visible to the public realm, and the Governor's Drive side of the yard is more visible from the right-of-way, and would therefore, construction on that side would be more detrimental to the character of the neighborhood. Criteria E, which speaks to the effect to which this would allow the establishment of a use not otherwise permitted. This would not allow the establishment of a use not otherwise permitted in this zoning district. And the applicant has stated in their materials, quote, the property is zoned R2, pools and elevated decks are permitted as an approved use. And the project does not change the zoning district boundaries shown in the official zoning map. Criteria F, the BZA may not consider profitability when considering this variance request. The applicant has stated in their materials that the desire of the owners to make the rear exterior living space of the property more usable and functional for the needs and desires of the immediate family and friends. The house is not a rental, and profitability is not a factor in the request of this variance. Criteria G, the need for the variance may be the result of the applicant's own actions. The existing structure is legally non-conforming, and this is with regard to the setbacks. The applicant has stated in their materials, quote, the presence and location of a naturally occurring and irreplaceable grand live oak in the center of the rear yard is a reason for the variance request, as shown by historical records in the letter provided by the town. The zoning and building permit for 31 Marsh Cottage Lane was issued by Charleston County in 1994, prior to the town of Kiowa zoning ordinance, which increased or set forth the current setbacks, notably the 40-foot side setback on Governor's Drive. Of the 11 properties in the Osprey Finger subdivision, as stated, 31 Marsh Cottage is the only lot that is constrained by the 40-foot setback. Criteria H, granting the variance may not be contrary to the public or neighborhood interests, may not adversely affect other property in the vicinity. The applicant has stated in their materials that the pool will cause no adverse effects to neighbors or neighboring properties. A well-developed landscape plan with predominantly native plant material to renaturalize the marsh front property has been proposed to ensure proper screening of the pool and deck from the public ground. And the proposed lot coverage is 31.1% and remains under the maximum requirement of 33%. The redesign now allows for 18 feet between the pool foundation and the existing drainage structure outfall maintained by the Kiawah Island Community Association, and the proposed plan would not encroach into the 6-foot drainage easement. The governance drive side of the yard is more visible from the right-of-way and would therefore, construction on that side would be more detrimental. Criteria I, this is the final criteria which speaks to the comprehensive plan. The granting of the variance may not substantially conflict with the comprehensive plan or purposes of this ordinance. The applicant's proposed plan does meet the lot coverage requirement. The applicant has also designed the proposed addition to include a unique structural system for the pool to preserve a substantial live oak with consultation from a certified arborist to protect the health of the tree. The applicant's letter of intent, this variance will not conflict with the comprehensive plan, will allow the owner to utilize the exterior living space at the rear of the residence while preserving the grand live oak. Within your materials, you would have seen a supplementary packet which includes letters that have been received from the public. That concludes staff review.
Questions for John?
Did anyone broach the topic with the homeowners that if they simply shrunk the size of the deck and pool, that they could stay within the lines a little better?
So I'll let the applicant speak to this, but 31 Marsh Cottage was a previous application that was submitted to the board previous month, which included a larger scope and size, and so it has been shrunk for this particular application. We're treating as a new application. So there is some significant changes from the previous application that shows a difference in size.
Put up a map again, please, showing the plat with the amount of encroachment, please.
John, do you have an overlay of the first request as in comparison to the second request to visually see how much it's changed?
I do not. The applicant probably will be able to speak to the square footage change. Yeah, that's, I'm sorry. That one?
Previous one.
That one?
Yeah.
Okay.
That work for you, Larry?
Yeah, that would work fine, thank you. This is the current now, the one that's up.
The, those two right triangles there, which are outside the red dotted line at the pool, that's the new areas of encroachment, is that correct?
Correct. And you'll note that in this previous one, the darker blue area shows the actual pieces of that would be actually in touching the ground. The other pieces are cantilevered. So the other components are cantilevered.
And the reason there's such a large encroachment now, the 663 square feet, that's that shaded area over to the left there, that's the existing house.
Correct.
Yeah.
Other questions for John? Okay, Mr. Ricks, or? Ms. Wicks.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Taylor Femmel. I'm with Remark Studio. I'm the landscape architect for 31 Marsh Cottage Lane. We have previously presented the exterior improvements on this project and took your feedback, your comments from this past August. We have designed a new approach. We've moved some things, we've shrunk some things, and have a significant reduction on the variance request by 48%. As evidenced in our submission, we have taken a multidisciplinary approach to develop a viable and constructible option with the unique and exceptional parameters of the site. We've reduced our setback request to 92 square feet on the rear and side setback. We are still under the allowable coverage at 31% coverage. The clients, Fred, who's here today, and Christy Farber, are seeking to install an elevated pool at their rear yard to expand their outdoor living spaces. Our submission includes 3 hardships that define the exceptional circumstances. One being the 32-inch live oak that's positioned in the center of the yard. It's really greatly reducing the improvement options around the critical root zone to protect the tree itself. 2 being the nature and habit of the tree itself. It leans towards one side of the property, really reducing and outlined in the arborist report, kind of pushing the pool to the side we have placed for those reasons. I would like to note that if placed on the other side, based off the original parameters and kind of sketches we've done, we would still need to seek a variance request in order to preserve that tree. 3, 31 Marsh Cottage Lane is a double frontage lot, and it's this really unique zoning condition with a 40-foot side setback. It's the only house in Osprey Fingers subdivision that has a 40-foot setback, and it's one of the only properties in all of Kiowa. I believe there's 5 total. These 3 unusual exceptional conditions reduce the utilization of the rear yard in its current state, which leads us to seek setback relief. I'd like to note that the house was permitted for construction in August of 1994, and the zoning ordinance which defined the setbacks was adopted later this year, so this house predates the setbacks that are currently in place. This is a confirmation of records that the property is legally non-conforming and that the current placement and orientation of the house predates the setback, as I mentioned. The permit records show there have been no changes to the original footprint to the house, so it's been in this state since its inception in 1995. I'd like to also mention that the Farbers purchased the house in 2001 and do not rent the house out. They're full-time residents and looking to be, as they retire, move down there full-time. The project has received letters of support from neighbors within the Osprey Fingers subdivision, one being the neighbor directly abutting the adjacent property line, and we've also have written support from Kiowa ARB. The setback request is keeping with the aesthetics of the neighborhood and the comprehensive plan for Kiowa. I'd like to direct you to this graphic showing the pool design itself with the setback overlaid on top of it. I'd like to note that of the 92 square feet of setback relief, only 10.6 square feet of that would be ground disturbance. 82.2 of that square footage would be cantilever basin, so there would be no ground disturbance in those areas. And obviously, the ground disturbance in the area is minimal for setback relief, and the neighbors are in support of it. Allowing the variance will not affect the character and development of the neighborhood, and it is our priority to ensure the integrity of the grand tree. Thank you.
Questions from the board?
No, that's okay. I mean, I had,
Might be on here.
what, I'm sorry, Joe?
If you look real careful, I wonder if that's on there, the previous. I don't know which one it is, but there is an outline of something that looks
it's-
like it was previous.
What page are you looking at, Joe?
Well, that one, but then I saw this one too. This right here.
If I can just make an additional comment about it, I had the chance, I'm sure most of us went out there and saw it. But we spoke at length, the owner came out and explained how this was gonna be built, not to affect the, did you see the size of those roots? But it was a pretty impressive system that they had spent a lot of time researching and taking care of, and I thought it was very interesting, if nothing else.
Other questions, comments? Yeah, Ben.
I was at the property this morning and I walked the property and I noted that the post that designated the northeast corner of the pool was in water, in the tidal water. Okay, and the southeast corner of the pool, I couldn't even walk out there because it was so soft. The ground was so soft, and I can't understand why you're building this pool into the marsh.
We are not affecting the OCRM line. I've also had a few conversations already with Ryan Elmers and the building department, and we've already discussed that we can, that they'll be reviewing the drainage and that we've designed this to account for the drainage. We're out of the drainage easement, and the pool will be constructed to handle the water, designed around the water.
But this wasn't drainage. I mean, it wasn't freestanding water. It's water that came in from the tide.
Well, the pool will be elevated, so the water will go around it. The deck around it is also elevated. It will be constructed with aggregate, under it drainage aggregate, to handle any the ebbing and flow of tides as needed.
But the pool is actually being constructed partially in the water. The foundation thereof, or the posts,
And
whatever.
we've engaged in with structural engineers. We have a geotech report, so the integrity of the pool itself can handle being periodically, if needed, the tides. I mean, it
ARB?
happens all the time.
Okay, does the ARB have any objection to building within the water itself?
I mean, it's rained heavily the past few days. I mean, it's a
Yeah,
wet
but
site.
it's been raining heavily for quite a while, and we're getting king tides regularly.
Based on the survey, the ARB looks at this as they're not building in the marsh. We understand that that's a low-lying area, and looking at the landscape plans that have been provided, we're okay with what they're proposing.
Marsh is effectively moving to that section, is it not? Because when I walked in it, I sank. I mean, it seemed to me that that's not very recent. I mean,
If there's an updated OCRM line that's showing that, we would certainly take that into consideration in terms of looking at the setbacks,
I
yes.
know that my home sits on the same island, you know, and we've had the same amount of rain that they've had at that location. And when I walked my property this morning, it did not sink. And when I walked their property, I was digging down, and I hadn't gained weight that much between the drive, so.
Right, I take your point, Councilman, that it is an issue that we're seeing at multiple properties around the island. I think we'll continue to deal with as a community.
And I think that building here, well, my feeling is you're asking for trouble if it gets more and more marshy. I just don't see the reason to build within what nature is trying to reclaim. My opinion.
How many feet is this elevated above the marsh?
It will match the elevation of the rear step, so, I mean, 14 feet.
The top of the pool? I'm sorry, I'm
The
Fred
bottom,
Farber.
the
I'm
bottom
not-
of it, the bottom of it,
Deck,
the deck of it.
It's elevated.
12 feet.
12 feet above?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we, with the meeting in August, we had the surveyor relay out the new pool, confirm the OCRM line, and then we had the geotech drill 2 locations within the pool footprint to design a helical pile system, which is a hybrid pile system. So they're going to drill 50 feet in 12 locations with a 3-inch post. It'll go down to firm ground 50 feet. A 3-inch post, they'll fill that with slurry and they'll pour a 2x2 cap on top of that. And then the grade beams will be on top of that and over on top of the roots, not bearing on the roots, but on the caps. And then the walls will be built on top of the grade beams. So we won't have loading on the ground per se. They'll be on the grade beams, and then that load will transfer 50 feet down, which is how all the homes, most of the homes are built around here.
Just for the record, Mr. Farber, would you just state your name?
Yes, Frederick Farber, 31 Marsh Cottage Lane, owner.
My question had nothing to do with the integrity and the structure of the pool. It was rather the integrity of the marsh that I was trying to bring to bear. And it doesn't seem that you have any concern about that.
I do not. I've vacationed there for 12, 15 years, 3 times a year before we bought it from Janie Nicodem. I'm a fisherman, I'm a civil engineer, I'm a land developer in Virginia. And I've seen the water in the island change over the years. The end of the island that I've fished many, many times a year, it just shifts. And as long as I'm within the OCRM and I can find firm ground, the construction doesn't concern me. If the water's moving, I mean, I've seen it in my other neighbor's front yard at times.
Well, you can ignore that if you want.
I'm not ignoring it at all. I'm just saying that I've seen it shift.
Yeah?
I'd also like to mention that our plan from a planting plan perspective is to actually replant the same marsh grasses all the way up to the new foundation. Right now, where you visited this morning, there was a lot more bare dirt, so we're gonna bring all those grasses and help with drainage all the way back to the backyard, because we're increasing the usable space up, or proposing. We're not going to be using the space at the ground level. So we are considering that from a renaturalizing of the marsh as well. We're really trying to bring that up as much as possible.
I'm not questioning that you can build it structurally secure. I'm questioning the possible damage to the marsh, which to me is sacrosanct.
If we're outside of the OCRM, we're outside of the kind of the drainage facility. I mean,
Regarding your landscape plan that I see, is this going to be a floating garden? Because it's all in water, underwater practically.
as a landscape architect, I specialize in native plant material and wetland plants. These plants are designed to handle the marshes, so the Spartina grass, the juncus that you see naturally in the marsh will be replanted all the way up to the edge of the foundation of the proposed pool. So that will also help with the ebbing and flowing of the tides going back and forth. So yes, these plants will be able to handle the wet feet.
Any other questions?
What is the date of the OCRM?
Within this year. So early this year, I believe it was February or March. I can try and pull it up.
And were we able to compare to the previous survey?
That would have been with the previous owner, so we do not have the original survey before that. So we just have the new survey of when the owner purchased it.
And do you have that digitally available?
Yes, I believe so. Sorry, I'm using the wrong thing. Do you have the page? It's L001.
This one?
Yep, sorry. Copy, but I don't know if that helps. image on the left is the certified, and the one on the right's just a little clearer for your reference, so I'll scroll down. Leave this pointer. Proposed pool area you can kind of see is already outlined. Our OCRM is back here. That was certified in, I believe that says April 23rd, 2023. Sorry, my eyes are not that good. So right here is our OCRM line.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I'd entertain a motion at this time.
I'd like to make a motion to approve, oops, to approve the 31 Marsh Cottage request for the pool and decking.
Did I hear a second?
Sorry, I didn't hear, what was the motion?
To approve their request for the pool and decking.
I'll second.
Further discussion?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, I'm going to vote against this. I think that when we start approving variances to build out into the marsh for pools that aren't necessary, I'd object to that.
And I find it interesting that there's so much concern for the tree, but no concern for the marsh.
So I guess part of it is, I live on the marsh, and I've seen the ebb and flow of it, and I was there yesterday, and it wasn't wet, and I was in dress sneakers, so maybe it was a little bit higher when you were there today. But we can't control the marsh on the island. I mean, there's a big marsh management program out there, and you look at everything that the town has done, and then you look at all the things Kika has not done in effect to, I don't want to say comply, because there's no rule about it, but the town has done extensive research on how important it is to manage the marshes, but yet our community association isn't necessarily managing them. So it creates this whole push and pull, what's right and what's wrong. But the reason I was saying yes to this was not that I'm oblivious to the fact that the marsh comes in and out and I can see where it was wet, but to the extensive detail that they took to maintain the integrity of the property and the new construction that they're doing. It just felt like they tried to take everything into accountability to make it work. And so to me, there was a kudos to that instead of just slapping it on the ground. They're not going really far back. It's just a wet lot.
It happens to be a wet lot, and sometimes you have to just live with what you got.
Yep, I totally know that feeling.
We have no responsibility to permit people to build on lots that are not sufficiently large enough to accommodate what they want to do. Because they want to do it, and I think that therefore we should, there's got to be times when we just got to draw the line, and there's not room here to do it with all the other stuff they want on that property.
My other question is, what if we went to that lot July 1st and it was dead summer and it was bone dry? Would we have this same conversation? It's just a question. If you went in July and the lot was bone dry like it was everywhere on the island, would we have that same conversation and concern?
But are you saying then that you can only build this in the summer, and then they remove it for the
No,
fall and the
that's not,
spring?
that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we went there and we all visited the lot, and it was dry in some places and wet in others. And we went during a historically wet time of year here on Kiowa. If we had gone in the summertime, or if the application was available in the summertime, and we walked the lot, and it wasn't wet, and we didn't see the marsh incursion, because it was wet and we didn't have a lot of king tides, would we have the same question? And that's all I'm asking.
I think the bigger
I would
issue,
hope that we would, because we know it occurs.
the bigger issue is really the marsh. I don't think whether it's wet or dry or whatever, and the overages are the deviation to the requirements.
Okay.
I take your point, Ben, but if it weren't for those two small right triangles that we talked about earlier, they wouldn't even be here. So they have the right to
Not obligated by what went ahead before us.
I understand. Yeah.
The key is preservation of the marsh. And if the marsh has decided it's moving in there now, it'll move there again. And it may move even further, in which case it'll exacerbate the overhang or the incursion into the marsh. That's what bothers me.
Further questions or discussion?
Take the vote?
I'll take the vote. Larry?
No, I vote against the variance.
Lynn?
I vote for it.
Morris?
No.
Ben? No. Jay?
Yes.
And Frank, yes. So it's 3-3. That means it's defeated, is it not? The motion does not pass. So,
Because if you make the same or the opposite motion without further discussion or further deliberation, you probably result in the same actions.
I think it would.
And so this would result in essentially a failed application.
Yeah, but do we have more opportunity to speak to this? I mean, obviously, I think we're missing a board member, and we've already been back a second time. I mean, at great expense and cost, we're really, spent a lot of time doing this.
They can resubmit, can they not?
We've had applications, I might need just some time to study it, but we've had applications based on reconsideration and for, I think, some additional information or a full body. I just need some time to research exactly how, if this particular application come back before the same group.
So you're going to do some research and talk to the applicant?
Yes.
And why don't you keep me in that loop also?
Okay, we'll do that. Because like I said, there wouldn't be any, without additional information or additional commentary from any of the board members, we would result in the same a tied vote does result in a non-passer, so.
It's not appropriate, Joe or John, to, as a reason for coming back, that there's one board member missing.
That's one of the things I want to look
Okay.
up to confirm that.
Oh, because we have an even amount.
It's my understanding, as long as we have a quorum of
We have a
4.
quorum, that's correct.
Quorum, it should be.
If we have 4, then it's binding.
That's it.
Correct.
Yeah.
This is a valid board meeting.
Okay,
As
well,
it stands,
that's the
as
decision
it
for
stands, we
today,
have
and
the decision.
John will take it from
Yeah,
here and do some
as-
research.
As for the record today, the case fails, but if there's something else, we will bring it back to the attention of the board.
Okay. John, any other business?
No, I know, it's easy for them to fix it.
There's not, we will have, please save the dates for our next month. We already have our 3 cases we'll have for next month, so please save the date for next month's meeting, that we will have a meeting.